or is this a desperate attempt to look confident? I've thrown out a lot there. James Wesley Rawls, survivalblog.com. We're going to break here in about 15 minutes. You've got the floor. Tell us where you want to start first and what you think is currently happening.
Well, Alex, I think looking at it from a 30,000-foot view, what we have in the global geopolitical realm is, with the end of the Cold War, the powers that be needed to have a continued destabilization as an excuse for carrying on with all of their banking shenanigans, their massive military buildups, and so forth. They, in effect, through Osama bin Laden and other Islamic leaders that they supported, the CIA itself created ISIS, as you've pointed out many times. They want destabilization. They are hoping that they can walk the tightrope of destabilization to the point where they can continue to consolidate power with a massively centralized government, with a electronic currency replacing physical currency, and with the whole statist agenda by building up the Islamic threat and then hoping to then counter that threat, all the time accumulating more power and wealth for themselves. But what I'm afraid is going to happen is that they are going to over-destabilize, and they will, in effect, create their own downfall, and perhaps the downfall of all the Western nations in the process. They're hoping that they can kind of walk that tightrope and carry on year after year after year. But I'm afraid it's going to come back and blow up in their face, because a lot of these terrorist groups that they have created don't have any compunctions at all against using true weapons of mass destruction, so that Wall Street itself may be the next ground zero. And the best laid plans of these totalitarian wannabes is going to come back and haunt them.
Well, you just crystallized it perfectly. I want you to continue, but I just want to back up, sir, what you were just saying. Obviously, I know you're retired, but you talked to a lot of your sources in government. I have amazing sources, high level in government, but also out. And people say, well, I mean, how do you do that? They're going after whistleblowers. Things are so bad now that mainly the U.S. Army, strangely enough, that's just historical, one of the oldest institutions in this country, has been the main group inside the Pentagon saying no to Syria, no to all these events, no to double-crossing Egypt. And they are basically telling the neocons, the left, and the socialists, you better stop it. And there's such a socialist vein in this godless, atheist, New World Order culture that really the only ideology they have is destroy the better clangers, destroy the farms, collectivize everything under corporate control. A type of high-tech fascist great leap forward, not communist, but fascist more like, and that they're blowing the engine that made the globalists have a major command base, and that the military, not even because the top brass and statisticians are angels, but because they want to keep playing golf and don't want their grandkids killed, they're saying, stop it right now. You're about to bring civilization down by crisis creation, because you keep getting more power out of crises, but at a certain point, this black hole is going to swallow you. Now, that message you just kind of threw out is the message I've been getting for about 6 years from high-level Pentagon people and others that obviously use this show as a conduit to warn people. But now, even down to low-level enlisted officers, they know the military basically has been warned. About 90% of the Army's on board. About 60% of the Marines are on board. About 60% of the Navy knows what's going on. For whatever reason, the Navy's not doing too good waking up. That's just kind of a dead reckoning number. But this is really a big deal, where you almost have a Mexican standoff between institutions in our government, newer, more corrupt private contractor institutions, and delusional people like Hillary and Samantha Powers and Obama, who have no idea what they're doing and watch Sports Center all day. At least Hitler was in a bunker when he was endangering his whole country and doing super dangerous stuff and knew he could lose and had been in the military. These people are completely out of their minds, and it really is frightening to see them not knowing what they're doing. And is that what you're basically coming down to?
Yes, I agree with you, Alex, that there is a level of self-delusion that now exists amongst the powers that be that's unprecedented. And their level of control over the economy, over the stock markets, manipulating the derivatives market, manipulating the precious metals market, which is a very thin market, the level of control they have is frightening. And again, it's likely to come back and blow up in their faces. And it's the law of unintended consequences. So for many years, you've talked about the Hegelian dialectic, and it's been employed heavily for the last 7 years under the Obama administration. And my fear is that regardless of who comes in the next administration, we're probably going to see a statist of some sort who's going to want to continue playing the same game, playing the same political games, playing pressure groups off of one another, trying to increase divisiveness within our own country by bringing in almost uncontrolled immigration of Islamists who are not going to be properly vetted at all. And in fact, right now there seems to be a preference within the U.S. State Department to bring in Islamists rather than persecuted Christians. So what does that tell us? It tells us that they want a lack of stability. They want to put people at odds with one another to create friction. And out of that friction, it's the Hegelian dialectic again. They create the crisis, and out of that crisis comes their solution, which is all stage managed to fill their coffers and to build political power.
And then under their Agenda 21 depopulation program, they codify the cosmology of us being poor and them being rich as their guardians, getting rid of the scourge of humanity, all perfectly scripted, where they play savior of the earth while they literally block industrialization, block systems that would set up a two-child family with all the actuaries we know that lead towards stabilization, global prosperity, and a new renaissance. And they themselves, going back even to Bertrand Russell and the nonfiction books of H.G. Wells and Galton and all the rest of them, admit 100 years ago that they were going to have to block a new renaissance and, quote, kill a lot of beautiful and gallant people, to quote H.G. Wells, to get their new world order. And they even wrote the book and had the movie Things to Come. The movie came out in the early 30s, where they set up a world government run by a UN that flies around in giant B-2 style bombers, actually shows B-2 bombers, right, nerve gassing nation states and taking the guns from the people and depopulating the planet. I mean, these people are completely out of their minds. But the thing is, they've got control because the British Empire got behind them and funded this wild dream. And Mr. Rawls, looks like they're pretty much getting there. Do you think they'll succeed?
It seems like it. You mentioned H.G. Wells and Things to Come. He was a socialist, but he was very prescient about what might happen. And you'll notice that in the storyline of Things to Come, the way that they were able to create their global governance was out of the aftermath of a global socioeconomic collapse following war after war after war. It looks a lot like what we're seeing right now.
And that's why his boss, as you know, anybody can look this up, the letters, the writings are public, the man that basically took the British Empire and folded it into the U.S. empire, Cecil Rhodes and the Rhodes Scholars, envision the whole plan we're currently living under.
Yeah, and ironically, the legacy of Cecil Rhodes is now being protested in South Africa. They don't want anything to do with any of the colonialist, any of that history. They're literally tearing down statues in South Africa at the universities right now. Cecil Rhodes really had a view not just for the African continent, not just, as they said in those days, Cape to Cairo, but for the whole world. And a lot of his proteges ended up creating organizations like the CFR and the Trilateral Commission and so forth. Years later, it's all been an almost uninterrupted chain of this quest for global dominance, global control, and they've very wisely co-opted the educational system, the mass media, and the banking system.
And let's be clear, go further. Again, you're getting the inside scoop here, listeners. Cecil Rhodes, all the rest of it, they even said, and he wrote, you can read it, 100 years ago, we will then even finally get rid of the trappings of the empire, the flags, the statues, the parades, the uniforms, and it'll be invisible through our corporate interlocking directorates like the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations, and it'll be multinational. And now that's why at Oxford and places, they're supporting, pulling down bust of the Queen. And that's why Obama sent back the bust of Churchill, is because they're going to even let the socialists and leftists pull that down and believe they've defeated it when they've actually are helping it bring in the next phase, the end of free speech. I mean, these folks are so sophisticated.
It is indeed. And it's worth mentioning that 20 years ago, the socialists in England turned their own flag, the Union Jack, into a supposed symbol of racism and colonialism. And they declared that the Union Jack couldn't be used in political rallies and protests.
That's right. In fact, the police tried to arrest you.
Right. That was 20 years ago. And at the time, I was in shock and disbelief that could happen. But right now in America, we're on the verge of that happening with our own American flag.
Exactly. They start with the rebel battle flag. It has nothing to do with slavery, but ignorant people are told so. So what if some toothless racists drive around with it? It's not what it symbolizes. And then now they want the American flag. And to expand on that, that was only one symbol of empire. The globalists have conquered. The Rothschilds and others have conquered England. They're using that model and the people they use to enforce it upon the world. It's moved on from England. It's still based there to a certain extent. But now they're demonizing anything Western when it's England that ended slavery worldwide. It's England that brought forward the abolitionist movement. And now in the ultimate victory, while slavery goes on in more than 10 Muslim nations today, and women are slaves in hundreds of nations, it's okay because the greatest evil on earth is England, where we got Magna Carta and the beginning of the Renaissance.
You're so right, Alex. It's just almost a sweet irony to see that the symbols of what really stand for freedom are being stood on their head, and the institutions that really stand for individual liberty are being denigrated, while everything that represents statism, control, collectivism, socialism are being lifted up by people like the Obama administration, by all the socialists of Europe and so forth. Right now, we are living in what I refer to as the age of deception and betrayal, where our basic institutions are, that anything that stands for freedom is being cast in a bad light.
We are living in the true fall of the West, and all the wealth and the cultural wealth being flushed down the toilet. When we come back, sir, I want to talk about what that looks like, what comes on the other side if we don't beat it, and where you think we are in the fight against it. Amazing guest, James Wesley Rawls. We need to get him on more and more, but he's such a busy guy. He usually can only come on for an hour, and that's rarely. He offered 2 hours today. I may just push the reporters, even though I love them and want them on, into the 4th hour. Check with Knight, see if that's good with him in the first 30 minutes, because I want to really walk through all this and look at the different sectors of the globe and the master plan, because knowing this plan, and this is a plan, I mean, this is public, folks. Knowing the plan is our chance to beat it. You understand how important this is? I never imagined 21 years ago going on air, local